Hey guys, thanks for joining me. Just a few weeks ago, I did a review on this AC battery box. This is a 2000 watt battery box from Licitti. And it's kind of a bring your own battery sort of thing where it comes without the battery and everything else you need to make it into a power station. Super easy. I'll leave a link to that video if you haven't seen it in the description below. But I think this thing was actually designed around what's in this box. Now this is Licitti's 280 amp hour kind of DIY battery kit. So let's get this thing out of the box, figure out how to put it all together, and then put it in this thing and see how it all works. All right, got the box open here. Let's see what we actually get in the box. So we got some strapping tape and some locking bolts. There's some high density closed cell foam with some cutouts. So I guess and some adhesive on the back. And it looks like things have numbers. So I'm seeing a 9 here and a 10 here. So we're expecting some pretty good instructions. So here looks like some bus bars, 6 and 7. This would be the battery BMS. So you can see everything is very clearly numbered. So this is looking pretty good. This is a 200 amp BMS based on that little 200 amp there. One user guide. Let's take a quick look. All right, looks fairly simple. Looks like some fiber board. I guess these are used to partition the cells and enclose the cells before you put it into the battery box. Got a parts list. Looks like a basic step walkthrough. We have got 4 of these guys. So these look like brand new cells. They don't look like they've been installed in anything before. Yeah, there's no like abrasions on them or anything like that that make it look like they were in some other device and maybe are being recycled. But you can see on here, we'll just set it flat, that each one of these are 280 amp hours at 3.2 volts. So there are 4 of these, which will give me a 12.8 volt battery bank when I connect these in series. And of course, then you can multiply 896 watt hours, which, if you just round that up to 900, that gives me just under 3,600 watt hours of capacity. Cycle life is greater than or equal to 10,000 cycles at 0.5 C, right? So, and that's going to give me a remaining capacity of greater than or equal to 70%. So these are very high quality, very long life batteries. All right, and that's the final item. And you can see they're clearly marked plus and minus, right? So positive and negative. So if we're going to connect these in series, what we want to do is alternate these, which is exactly what the instructions will tell us. Right there, plus minus, right? So we'll connect them just like that. We'll see what kind of voltage we're getting right out of the box. 2.78, 2.78, 2.78, 2.779, or roughly 2.78. All very closely matched in terms of state of charge, so that's good. All right, following our little skeleton instruction sheet here, step 2 is to use this, and you can see it's got a 2 on it. So we need to use strapping tape to kind of tape these in the vertical direction, and then it looks like next we're going to put a couple of straps in the horizontal direction. And then it looks like step 3, we will attach item 3 here, which is the BMS on the end. And then we will use more of number 2 here, put a couple of straps around the BMS here to hold it in place. 4 and 5 are the connections to the BMS. All right, and then 6 and 7, that would be to add the bus bars. Yeah, so 8 is right here. It's these probably balance and maybe temperature leads. 9 is going to be adding the terminal lock nuts. And then over here we have, it says test connector of 5P wire. So let's see if we can figure out what that is. 10 is to add this little block down the middle. Yep, and then it looks like we just add the fiber board in that particular configuration. So I have to be careful. I make sure I add those in the right order. And then we tape all the seams. Looks like that's pretty much all there is to it. All right, let's get to it. So I got steps 1 and 2 done here. Actually, 1, 2, and 3. And man, this strapping tape that comes with the kit is super sticky. That adhesive is crazy strong. And yeah, it is not going anywhere. All right, let's move on to the next step. We're going to, looks like, attach the BMS. And I do want to point out here, these are actually like emergency vents. You do not want to cover those up with the tape. So take care not to do that. And then when you apply this top foam here, later on near the end, you want to pull these little punch outs here out like so, so that those vents are open on each cell, just in case they need to vent. Okay, something I want to point out that's not very apparent from the instructions, this little L bracket that's here on the corner of the setting like this, on the corner of the BMS, it was sitting in a way that kind of has the obvious nut and bolt combination with the lock nut, so that the long side is vertical. But in fact, if you take this little resin board here, the one that says negative, and you put it up there in position on that end, you'll see that if you were to put it on the long side vertical, it would actually be above the, it would be above the resin board. It wouldn't fit in that slot. So what you need to do, apparently, is you need to mount this so that the short side, so the short side of this little L bracket, the short side of the L is mounted in this orientation, so that this exposed tab is low enough to fit into the slot of the resin board. So it's going to be short side pointing down and long side horizontal. So we will attach it in that orientation. So you do have to remove the little nut and bolt combo. It's like they put it on slightly backwards during packing. So just be aware of that. All right. Now we should be good to go. Just double check that fit. Yeah. So you can see the tab fits through that little slot. In order to attach these little sensing leads, there's some obvious ones here, like the black goes to the battery minus, the red goes to the battery plus, which is going to be down here on this end. But you know, where do you attach these other ones? They only have numbers on them, 1, 2, and 3 on these little wire labels. But where do they go? Well, it's not at all apparent in this document. It's really, well, if you zoom into that, you might be able to make it out. It's a little easier to see in the actual user guide, but I actually had to take a picture of it with my phone in order to actually see it. So I'm going to use that as my guide here, as you can see. So balance lead 1 goes to, and basically one of those, so as I mentioned, there's 3 white wires and they go to each of the bus bars here. So 1 goes to the first one, 2 goes to the second one over here. It's just going across the battery assembly, and then the third one goes up here. And then battery plus goes on this one, battery minus goes on this one. So that's the order that they go in. So we can go ahead and lay those out. And by the way, it should be pretty obvious because these are cut to length in such a way that they're not going to really fit on, on any other of these terminals. So this is battery minus. So this one has to go over here to battery minus. And we're looking for 1, which is going to have to go to this guy. 2, which is this one, will have to go over to this guy. And then 3 will go all the way over here to this guy. So this is 3. If I pull the little tab up there, there's a little 3 on it. So we'll go ahead and run that down there to that bus bar. All right, and then we have over here, if I can string that underneath, this one will come all the way over. In fact, I'm going to kind of try to make room for it here, over to the positive bus bar. And once we have that all laid out, we can put the lock nuts on these guys here. Kind of hold everything into place. All right, so we'll start with the negative, and I'm just going to finger tighten these first. And you do want to take care, obviously, when you're putting all this together, you don't short anything out. So every one of these terminals is going to have a little lock nut. Don't over tighten them because you don't want to strip these terminals. Now this guy is the temperature sensing lead, and as I mentioned, I'm not going to bundle it down just yet because I want to actually do a test on it before we buckle this all up to make sure that I understand what its function is. But I think the next step, if we look at this, is to test the 5P wire connector. And that's basically to make sure that we've got this assembled correctly. And so we're going to try to do that. And then once we verify that it's assembled correctly, then we're going to go in and put this little foam piece on. Right. So the idea is that they want us to check here on this little lead to make sure that we're comparing B1, which if you take a picture of that, it'll be easier to see. My older eyes here are not cooperating, but I did take a picture of it, and what you'll be able to see is that B1 is on the opposite side from where the QR code is. So B1 is this first pin over here to the inside of the BMS, and we're going to compare the B- terminal on this connector to B1, B2, B3, and B4. And so the way this connector connects with these little keyed ridges is it would go on the top. All right, so B- is the one in this direction. It's the one on the far end, and then we're going to see if we can get a comparison off the battery, and what we should see is a accumulating voltage. All right, so there we have 2.78, and if I go from there to the next one, 5.54, so you can see we're just adding them up. The next one, there we go, 8.33, then over here we should get something just south of 12 volts. There we are, 11.1, so we are adding those up from left to right. So that is connected correctly. If you get the voltages is wrong, you will need to go double check your wiring. But we know now that it's safe to go ahead and connect this. And again, the little ridges will be facing the top. There we go. That should be connected. So our BMS is live now. All right, again, I'm going to leave the temperature lead separate for now. And let's go ahead and connect this little foam board on the top. And again, taking care to make sure that we are not blocking any of these vent holes. There we go. So that should be good. All right, so according to this, all that's left is to put the resin board on and then tape up the seams, and we should be ready to go. So let me go ahead and do that. All right, just so we can test everything before we put this top piece on, and also double check this little temperature lead, make sure we know what this does. I've got my battery charger, so I'm going to go ahead and connect that to the negative tab, and then to the positive tab. And let me go ahead and fire the charger up here. Right, you can kind of hear it running there. Put it right down there. So with a temperature sensor, the BMS is going to monitor the battery cell temperature and provide some protection. We're going to find out if this is a low temperature protection or not. And to do that, I'm just going to use some compressed air here and try to cool down this little lead here and see if we can hear the battery charging stop after a little while. So let's just try that and see what happens. All right, so apparently I'm not able to cool this thing down fast enough. The can is getting really cold. However, this isn't really changing much. So I got to try something else. All right, since the compressed air didn't work, I'm going to use some ice water. So we're going to take the tip of this and dip it in the ice water and see if that does anything. You can see here that we are pulling 19 amps. All right, based on this test, I'm gonna have to say this does not have low temp protection. So now, let's try another test. All right, so I have here my wife's hair dryer. Clearly it is not mine. So let's put this on hot, fan on low. And keep your eye on the amp meter. All right. All right, as you can see, we are now no longer pulling any amps, and it just kicked back on because the temperature went on. So clearly this is a high temp protection probe, not a low temp protection probe. All right, I went ahead and fully topped off the battery pack with my 20 amp 12 volt battery charger. And then I went ahead and put the resin board on top and sealed it up just to complete the assembly. And I went ahead and used a Sharpie to quickly mark the negative and positive terminals, just in case the little labels came off on the side. I want to make sure that I never got that mixed up. So let's just check and see what the charged voltage is. It should be well rested because I've unplugged it several hours ago from the charger. And let's just see what we end up with. All right, so 13.92 volts at a full charge. Let's go ahead and assemble this into the actual battery box, and then we'll go run a few tests on it and see what kind of performance we actually get. All right, let's get this 280 amp hour beast into the battery box. All right, I got this thing all buttoned back up. You can see from the time lapse there that I struggled a little bit getting the battery into the actual case. And mostly that was due to the battery strap, the little plastic buckle that if you leave it on the side, it's going to catch on the charge controller because there's just not enough clearance side to side. I moved the plastic buckle to the top and that was fine. So I was able to get it in with that. Then the other part I struggled with, which I struggled with it, whether or not you're using the 280 amp hour battery option, and that is getting the back cover back on, getting all those screws to bite. That if I could make one recommendation, I would say change out those screws, figure out what the threads are, change those screws out from that little Allen wrench design to something that's a little bit easier to kind of get in there and work with. Having to try to screw those in with that little tiny Allen wrench, super annoying. But I will say once you get it in there, you don't really have to get in there very often, if ever, again. So got the thing all set up. I went ahead and turned it on. You can see I've got the display up there. All right, so let me go ahead and we're gonna run a oil heater test on this, find out how many watt hours we actually get out of this 280 amp hour battery kit. So I'm gonna plug this in to there, turn the AC inverter on, and let's see what kind of, we are pulling 120 volts. Let me go ahead and put a load on that. All right, we hear the fans kick on immediately. Right, and I'm going to switch that over to watt hours. We're just going to log the watt hours. There we are, starting to tick up. Let that run all the way down. This says I've got 4 hours and 52 minutes of runtime on what I'm pulling out of this, which is about 810 watts. So let's find out how many actual watt hours we get, and we'll check back when it's done. All right, we are back. The system is alarming now because it is shut down. It is not outputting any AC power at the moment. I'm not sure if we'll get a display here. It is saying we have 7 amp hours remaining. Now at 280 amp hours, that would give us a 3,584 watt hour capacity. So let's find out what we actually got. We know we're not going to get that because we were going through the AC inverter. So let me connect this to grid power. Right, and we got 3,180 watt hours out of a rated 3,584 watt hours. So that would be an 88% efficiency, which is above average. Now, if I were to hook up a battery shunt, maybe I should do that next, and monitor the discharge through the battery shunt once it's calibrated, I think we'll get a pretty interesting output from that. We can actually get a very accurate number on the number of amp hours we actually got. So maybe we'll do that real quick and just kind of report back on that. All right, as you can see, what I've done here is I pulled this battery out after fully recharging it with my 20 amp charger, which took like 15 or 16 hours, by the way. That took a very long time and only 20 amps. So what this is gonna do, this is a Victron Smart Shunt. I'm gonna pull up the app here on screen so you can see. This is gonna allow me to fully calculate or fully document how many amp hours we actually are getting. I've got another space heater plugged in to here, and you can see we're pulling about just under 700 watts. And we're going to be able to log that since I'm actually bypassing the inverter and I'm actually logging right off of the battery exactly how much power is coming out of that battery or in, right? So we're going to be able to see when this thing fully shuts down how many actual amp hours out of that 280 rated amp hour battery capacity we actually got. So let's check back when this thing is fully done, and we'll take a look at the app and see how many amp hours we actually were able to get. All right, as you can see, we're at 0% stated charge. Let me go ahead and turn the unit off. No point in leaving that plugged in. Let's pop up the app here for the Smart Shunt. And you can see we pulled a total of 283.4 amp hours out of this 280 amp hour rated battery kit from Licitti. So very good capacity numbers coming directly off the battery in this case. So the reason we got 88% of rated when we came through and recorded it with my little watt meter here is because we were coming through the inverter side. Coming directly off the battery, we got 101% or something like that. So yeah, very good numbers from this 280 amp hour battery kit from Licitti. Now, as I briefly alluded to earlier, one thing that kind of did bother me, was kind of annoying about this 2000 watt battery box, was that at least on my particular kit, the screw holes in that back aluminum back plate there were just slightly misaligned to the threaded holes in the case, making it really challenging to get all 4 of those screws lined back up and screwed in properly. Now, the easy solution for me was to just kind of drill a slightly larger diameter hole into one of the holes on the plate, and after that, not really a problem. I'm still not a huge fan of those Allen head machine screws it comes with. It's certainly not the little Allen head wrench. But if you're not, constantly trying to get in and out of the battery box like I've been doing, it's probably not really an issue and easy enough to change out to a different screw type if you wanted to, or maybe just use a better screwdriver. So yeah, I think this 280 amp hour DIY battery kit makes an excellent pairing with this Licitti 2000 watt battery box, since putting them together allows you to take full advantage of the battery box's 2000 watt AC inverter, and you do end up with over 3.5 kilowatt hours of battery capacity for right around 20 cents per watt hour, which is about the lowest cost I think you're going to find for these kinds of specs. And personally, I do think it's also a great way to do your first battery build from raw cells, since it comes with basically everything that you need. And you'll definitely learn a few things along the way and increase your confidence to build something bigger down the road if that's something that you ever want to do. And of course, you could also pair that 280 amp hour battery kit with your own inverter and charge controller instead of the battery box if you prefer, and you're still getting a massive amount of capacity at an extremely low price per watt hour. I mean, just think about it. You could actually buy like 4 of these DIY 280 amp hour kits, connect them in series to create a 48 volt battery bank with over 14 kilowatt hours of capacity, and you'd be paying just over $2,000. And that is crazy cheap. And just about, like I said, the easiest way to DIY a system like that. So definitely worth considering. And if you are thinking about checking these things out, do make sure that you expand that video description below and use the discount codes that I've got down there so you can get the best out the door price. There's no commission for me in it either way, whether you do or whether you don't. I'm just trying to pass along any benefits that I can for you if you're interested. Okay, I think that's a wrap. I do hope you found at least something helpful in the video. If you did, please consider clicking on that like button for me. I'd really appreciate that. And if you're not already a subscriber, maybe consider subscribing as well. I offer my sincere thank you for stopping by and watching this video with me, and I do hope you'll consider joining me for the next one. Until then, have fun out there.